Well, Jim, speaking of really bad transitions, you mentioned at the top that you saw these quotes from CM Punk. Did you read the articles? What have you seen about this?
Well, I have heard that Punk commented on a potential return to professional wrestling. I think to the folks at Sports Illustrated. If I'm going to comment on his comments, at least you read the comments. If you read the comments, I'll comment on the comments.
Okay, I have a couple.
And then we'll see if you have any comments.
I have a couple of quotes here. This, like you said, is from an interview with Justin Barrasso of Sports Illustrated, asking CM Punk about the idea he would potentially return. I don't know, Punk said. I've said no before in interviews. I'm not fishing for a deal. I get offered to do a lot of stuff, and I say no to 90% of it just because my thing is I need to work with quality human beings. It just seems like maybe in pro wrestling there's a lack of quality human beings. I don't know. I like doing fun quality projects. If there's a fun quality project that gets sent my way, I will listen to it. He continued, I don't need the money, and the way the wrestling business is now, it's wacky. You've got WWE, who has multiple billion-dollar television deals, and the television's awful. I go back there, I'm just another guy. And it's not even that. I'd be just another guy that's doing not good television. I want to do stuff that's good. I want my name attached to quality projects where it's fun and it makes people laugh, smile, think, and people don't hate watching it. I want to do fun stuff.
Well, there you go. I understand exactly, and at least he's honest. It's not fun anymore for him. And if it's not fun anymore and you don't need to support yourself with it, why do it? And that's, so I can identify with that. And, I admire him for saying it because it's true. He's not, and I don't see that him using this as a negotiating thing. Like if Nash was saying this, so of course he's got two people that are trying to offer him something. He's trying to get the most out of one of them. But I don't see Punk saying this as a negotiating tactic. I think he's telling the truth. And as I've said before, I like it when guys leave of their own volition or on their own terms. And he had the best fucking outline ever telling Triple H, I don't need to work with you. You need to work with me. And see ya. I mean, that's the only other closing line that I've ever heard from a guy in the wrestling business. I didn't hear it, but Bill Dundee told the story in Australia for Jim Barnett. This is one of the first stories I heard when I got in the wrestling business. Paul DeMarco, famous wrestler of the 60s and 70s, was also the booker for Barnett at the time. And Dundee said that Paul DeMarco brought the book into Barnett's office and plopped it down on the desk and said, I have mastered the business and I'm done. And he turned around and went to the airport and flew back to the United States. But there's truth in this. What CM Punk's presence alone, and no taking nothing away from CM Punk's talent, CM Punk's presence alone would not make that television automatically go from rotten to great. So he would be a guy doing not, and I'm sure that people have offered some, I would imagine, variety of independent promoters have offered him. Do you think there's any way that over the last 5 years that independent promoters have not quietly offered CM Punk a lot of money to show up and do something? Is it possible that those offers have not been made in this world?
I think it's possible the offers haven't been made. It's possible that inquiries were made whether they should or shouldn't make an offer.
Well, the point is, if you could even get a hold of him to make an offer, I mean, I've had some wacky fucking suggestions, and even that one of those garbage promotions at one time said I got an email. God, it was one of the WrestleMania weekends. I was going to be somewhere, and I got an email from, I don't know, Oshkosh Wrestling. I don't know. I didn't know anything about them. Just said, inquiring about your availability on such and such date, and to do what? For who? Right? And then I found out it's one of the garbage promotions. But point is, he's had offers. He's had offers, and he hasn't done it because he doesn't need to do it. He doesn't want to do it. And I respect that. And I wish that I had his commitment. Because every time that after I said I was done with the wrestling business a few years ago, every time that I said, well, I like this guy, I could do him a favor, or I got a soft spot there, it's not too far, then it ends up being a rib on me. So for him as exacting as he is, to show up and just to take a check to be on a rotten show and then have people remember, well, the last thing we saw CM Punk on was pretty rotten. He don't want to do that, and I don't blame him.
And he knows that's the reality. If they said, we'll give you $50 million, come back. And he said, you know what? It's so much money, I'm going to do it. He knows the first week there'll be some wacky backstage segment with bad acting, everyone standing at different weird angles, bad humor. He knows exactly what it'll be. The more I see with him giving comments or quotes about modern wrestling and his thoughts on it and how he would fit into it, the more I find myself agreeing with him. He seems like he's really on the money.
Except, here's the thing. Now that you've just said $50 million, as much as I admire him and his honesty and him leaving on his own terms, if somebody said, I'll give you $50 million, I wouldn't blame him if he came back and did it and made fun of doing it and made fun of the idiot that gave him the $50 million and said, look at this rotten shit I was on and I got $50 million. That would probably get him more over than he ever has been. But maybe anything less than that, we'd go back into, remember CM Punk, he was on that shitty show. But you can't, if you give a shit about what the wrestling business was and is supposed to be, and are not just doing this because you didn't save your fucking money and that's not my fault, that you have to embarrass whoever nameless people I'm talking to out there, that either for one of two reasons, either they didn't save their money, so they have to embarrass themselves on rotten programs for money, or they have money, but for whatever reason they can't get off fucking television, even if it's a rotten show. I don't get that mindset, but that's why for people who gave a fuck about the wrestling business in general and just their contribution in it, formerly being viewed positively. And if you come back and get involved in something like this, how many things did I turn down because the movie The Wrestler, not with Mickey Rourke, not Ed Asner, I didn't want to do autograph shows for a long time after that, because instead of now in my mind, at first it was like, well, even if they're small shows or whatever, if it's close or I get to hang out with so-and-so or, somebody I like is there and we can talk or what. Now it was like, well, anybody that sees me is going to think I need the fucking money to come to this goddamn place and sign these autographs. And then it's like, well, fuck, I don't really need the money, but, it'd be nice to go and get it because they're willing to pay me and I'd get to hang out with all these people. But now I feel bad about it. Because people are like, oh, shit, he needs the money, too. Because in The Wrestler, everybody's falling asleep signing autographs in an empty fucking National Guard armory. Or when somebody is trying to book you on a wrestling show, I've mentioned this over the last 4 or 5 years. I did it with Court Bauer and MLW. I did it with the NWA guys. I did it with several different wrestling-related things I've done over the last 5 years. Is the Invisible Man on the card? Is anybody in the middle of a match going to break out into a dance routine? Is there going to be any science fiction, teleportation, fucking children wrestling, whatever the case may be? I had to get assurances from people trying to book me on a wrestling show that it was actually a wrestling show and not a goddamn bunch of caca. Why do I need to go through that all the fucking time? It's the same. Can you imagine the conversations if CM Punk took all his phone calls that he would have with people? I can't imagine, because I don't even talk to any, and haven't for the past 2 or 3 years, or at least any wrestling promoter that I haven't met and don't personally know. And I still have to ask them. So imagine just cold calling. CM Punk would have to, well, okay, what the fuck is this going to do to my goddamn reputation before I agree to this? So I understand completely. It's not fun, and it's not going to come back, so it's never going to be fun again.
And by the way, just in terms of wanting to negotiate with him, just like Bruno, you had to wait until Triple H made the call because it wasn't going to be Vince. With CM Punk, you probably have to wait till it's not Triple H making the call.
Well, I wonder who's going to be the executive from fucking Amazon that runs the WWE when they own that. That'll be several sales from now.
He's smart, though. He realizes, hey, I'm enjoying my life. I have money. I have success. I have love.
His wife, AJ, did I just see that she is... Because you hear all the time also in wrestling or in anything else, right? Everybody in LA, they say, is driving an Uber as a screenwriter. So the story was that AJ Lee, Punk's wife, and somebody, I guess, that she works with are going to write a movie script. And I roll my eyes on me. Oh, sure they are, right? It's apparently the sequel to a movie that grossed $150 million.
I just saw that this morning, yeah.
So apparently old AJ Lee is going to be a fucking screenwriter, because that's got to be, if it's the sequel to a movie that grossed $150 million, somebody is not going to just hand this over to some fucking jackleg, right? So they have to have seen some of her work and believe that she can do that. So it's not just like, somebody, his wife is going to write something, or his daughter is going to do something, or his grandmother's going to fucking act in a movie or whatever. This apparently is legitimate. So I have a feeling that I don't need the money is going to be something that Punk says a lot going forward.
And he mentioned quality human beings. And if you don't want to put up with that whole WWE backstage circus behind the scenes and the ass kissing and everything else, if you don't want to deal with any of that, I understand.
Well, and don't just go back there. What would he want to deal with? Whether it's the ass kissing and the politics and the walking on eggshells into WWE, or would he want to show up in AEW with the, all friends wrestling there where they got 6 clicks and he'd be a bigger star than all of them, but they'd figure out a way to fucking nip that in the bud.
Well, my point is he goes to meetings.
Or would he want to? Well, I'm just saying, pick a wrestling. What wrestling promotion now could serve CM Punk as well as he could serve them, and would be a place that is something that he would want to do
without knowing what kind of condition he's in or anything else? Because I think he's around my age and he hasn't done this in a while. I think he would be a big service to anyone. But my point is, if he's taking all these meetings. No. Listen
to what I said. What wrestling promotion out there could be as much of a service to him as he could be to them?
None of them.
And that's my point. Where would he be put in a position where he'd like it backstage, or he'd like it in the ring, or he wouldn't have?
But that was my point. But that was my point. He's dealing with all this stuff in the real world in the entertainment industry, where people are probably catering to him when he goes to a meeting or does all these different things. Not the backstage world of professional wrestling, which is bullshit. So I don't think any promotion would appeal to him, but especially not WWE. And you're right, there isn't a promotion that offers him more than he offers them, no matter what he brings to the table right now. New Japan, AEW, right. Impact, Ring of Honor. He would bring to them more than they would bring to him.
I could see if he wanted to have a wrestling match with somebody, I can see him doing something with New Japan, because they could contract like they did with Jericho. Okay, have a big match or two in a big building, and otherwise go on about your business and be free to live a life of religious freedom or whatever. But I don't see why in the world he'd want to be involved in anything with any American promotion, because of the various levels of either bullshit you have to put up with behind the scenes, or amateur hour bullshit you have to put up with in the ring and behind the scenes.
What if he gets like a Brock Lesnar kind of deal? Not full-time, cherry-pick dates, maybe he takes a little more booking control over his programs than Brock would, if they would allow that. What if they came to him a special package like that? Not being Sting, but being Brock.
Well, who? AEW or WWE?
WWE.
He'd still be on rotten television.
That's true.
So that's we've already established that he would not. If there's the thing, Ring of Honor does great television. He'd actually, and he was obviously over with the Ring of Honor audience that existed 15 years ago. So he could go in and have a match probably with anybody he wanted to in the world, and they would book it, and it's a good television show that we've seen that they were taking the pure tournament and when they were taking the pandemic seriously and all that stuff. But it's better television than fucking WWE or AEW. But they wouldn't be able to pay him. AEW be great television or be a great payoff. The television show is what it is, and it ain't going to get any better unless they revamp everything. And then who would he really want to work with amongst that bunch?
Here's another thing. If he came back in this fantasy world that we're talking about here, if CM Punk came back to wrestling, would he want to wrestle one of the top current guys, or would it entice him if someone put up the money, Punk versus Samoa Joe? The rematch, whatever, 15 years in the making.
Well, but see, here's the thing. He probably would want to have matches with people that he had never worked with, because at least it would be new. But the people that he's never worked with, probably there wouldn't be as much money in it as other names that would be bigger that he may have worked with in the past. With Joe, that I would say that might be a hard sell just because of the time that's passed. But now with the internet, everybody that ever loved Samoa Joe and CM Punk could tune in simultaneously. Who knows? I don't know if he'd want to do that, because then do they want to do, when they're 42, what they did when they were 25, or tried to, and will it measure up? I think he'd probably want something, an opponent new that he hadn't worked with before, to do something different. And I think he would probably want it to be on a good program to where it might actually stand a chance of drawing money in whatever way they were going to try to monetize it, pay-per-view or internet stream or whatever the case. And I don't see anybody around being able to pull all of that off. So, we shall see. Do you have any final thoughts?
No, that was kind of it. I was kind of in my head thinking about, imagine if there was an alternate kind of all in, and you took guys like Punk and Samoa Joe, who knows what Joe's going to do. This may be the only time he's a free agent. Maybe not. Maybe he'll be a free agent forever. Who knows? But it gives you a limited window where you could take some of these guys like them and maybe a few other people. You bring people in. Again, you do it like all in, just instead of the Bucks and Omega and Cody, it's Samoa Joe and CM Punk. I wonder how much success there would be for a show like that. You couldn't worry about live gate because of the pandemic. But in terms of a pay-per-view or an internet pay-per-view, whatever it may be, I wonder how much of a market there would be for something like that.
Yeah, sometimes the time is just not there. The time doesn't come to where something would be perfect. A lot of people asked me, especially every time I'd go to a fan fest or a comic convention or something in anywhere around East Tennessee, or like at LexCon, because Lexington ain't that far from Knoxville. And several people pitched me the idea, and maybe you want to advertise or contribute or whatever, do a Smoky Mountain Wrestling reunion in Knoxville. The reason I never wanted to do that was because like a reunion card, actually have wrestling and autographs and whole nine yards, not just like have a fan fest. Besides the fact that everybody at that time, even this was 10 years ago or more, was older. Some people were already gone. And then we've lost more since then. But besides that, so why would I want to go and book a place in Knoxville that might seat 1,000 people and maybe draw 700 or 800, because it was 10 years ago, and even now almost everybody's gone. But why would you want to do that when the promotion that we were running for our major events, we're running the Knoxville Civic Coliseum. We're putting 3,000 or 4,000 people in there. We've got a television program on a local Fox affiliate, and the ratings are good. I didn't see how that you could promote a reunion Smoky Mountain Wrestling show without having a television program, without being a fixture in town anymore, without having a full roster, et cetera, et cetera. You couldn't go to a big building like the Knoxville Coliseum. And so I didn't want to do a reunion show that would be so much smaller and lower budget than what we were doing to begin with. The timing just wasn't there. If it had been, different timing of a different period, and you could still, go back and do something, like Ron Fuller 20 years ago, during the downhill slide of the Attitude Era. He did it in summer 2000. He was doing the K-Town SmackDown series, and he ran Chilhowie Park every Friday night for like 12 weeks all summer, and was doing between 1,000 and 2,000 people. And I remember it's the funniest thing, because his first show, he had almost 2,000 people there, and me and him are standing there side by side, which looked hilarious since he's a foot taller than I am. And he was looking out at the crowd with his mouth open, and I was looking out at the crowd with my mouth open, but our mouths were open for two different reasons. I had sworn, didn't think there was any way in the world, and with no television, just radio and word of mouth and his local promotion, I didn't see how in the world he was going to put 2,000 people in Chilhowie Park for wrestling in that particular time period. And his mouth was open because of all the promotion he did and all the radio and the card that he had, because he'd been away from wrestling for over 10 years. He couldn't imagine there was only 2,000 people there. So he was fucking heart sunk, and I was, wow, because he didn't realize times had changed. And now try to run a wrestling show in Knoxville, Tennessee, and draw 2,000 people outdoors at Chilhowie Park with no television, and see how far you get. It's just, you used to could do something like that, and about 20 years ago was the time where the downhill slide started. You can't really do that anymore.
And here's the other thing with Punk, and it reminds me of the discussion about Sting versus The Undertaker. And it reminds me of years ago, someone I knew who worked at Epic Records, and he had worked on the Clash on Broadway box set, which is this great box set of the Clash. And this is when Joe Strummer was still alive. I remember saying to him, I really wish the Clash would get back together and do a reunion. And he said, no, you really don't. Like, he got it. Like, it would never be that again. Yeah. It would never be as good. It would never be the same. And we've seen guys make comebacks, and they impress. But that's the other thing with Punk. I mean, it more than likely would never be whatever expectation someone has for it if he returned.
Yeah, the discussion of the Undertaker Sting match is right. People wanted to see it more than they would have when they actually saw it, because then somebody has to lose, and it's also not going to be probably what they had in their heads. And so some things are just better left unsaid.